Greetings from Tokyo, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And today I'd like to continue on, if I may, with a video a day during this month of October 2020, wherein I talk about a film or a TV series that in one form or another, in my view, has something to do with the spirit and tradition of Halloween. And so today, if you don't mind, I'd like to speak to you about a very interesting film. This is from 1985 and from the filmmaker Stuart Gordon. The name of the film is RE-ANIMATOR. This is the Arrow video release that I have of RE-ANIMATOR, and it's a phenomenal package. I am incredibly impressed, as always, with Arrow releases, and this is another great example, my friends, and so I was very fortunate to be able to get this. The film RE-ANIMATOR is one of those wonderful examples of 1980s horror. And I say that because it is very bloody and it is chock full of a lot of graphic special effects scenes, as is befitting this type of film. However, it is a film that also is very multifaceted because it seems to be a blend of many different forms and tones that come together in this wonderful, beautiful, bloody mess of a film. And I mean that with the utmost respect and positivity, because I think the mess that occurs and all the chaos and all the absurdity that happens along the way, all this stuff is utterly wonderful and entertaining as an example of the horror genre. Of course, it won't be for everyone. No film is, I know. So if you do not like gore and violence and nudity, then this film will very likely not be for you. However, for those for whom this type of film is okay, then you probably know the film RE-ANIMATOR already. And for those who don't know the film, then I suppose as a way of trying to discuss it in very general terms, I can tell you that it is a really blood-soaked horror film, but it's blood-soaked in a way that leads to a lot of creativity and a lot of ingenuity and a lot of different forms and shapes that emerge, let me put it that way. And so it is a film of the imagination, most definitely. And also, I should say that it has, of course, its inspiration from the world of H.P. Lovecraft. And so I think that link between the horror and the mysterious and the imagination, I think, is well based and well founded in that inspirational source, as I say, from H.P. Lovecraft. But alongside those different forms and tones, this is a film that is also a horror comedy, and it's not just a comedy. It's a very wonderfully paced slapstick comedy, and also an absurdist romp from a certain point of view. There are some moments here that are quite brilliantly depicting slapstick and broad physical comedy that I think carry themselves very effectively and lead to a wonderful lightening of the tone that could otherwise be overwhelmed by the gruesomeness of some of the set pieces of the film. In other words, I think this is a film that is well balanced with the comic and the horror elements. And so this is often described as a horror comedy because of those reasons. And I think those descriptions are very apt indeed. This is a really fantastic example of the horror comedy genre. I should also say that it also has a lot of homages. Now, I've already mentioned the connection and with the inspiration and source that is H.P. Lovecraft, but I should also point out as a cinematic form of homage, we, I think, have a lot of things that we can point to. There are, of course, the slapstick modes that I referred to a moment ago. And I think we can find that those set pieces could be derived from, or maybe paying respect to, or otherwise taking cues from certain of the classic slapstick films of the years past. And so there is a cinematic comic tradition that I think in a really great way is being carried on in the form of Re-Animator. Also, in terms of cinematic homage, I think we can safely say that there are a lot of winks and winks to the crowd, winks to the audience with regard to homages to, say, Hitchcock. I think one of the famous, or perhaps infamous, aspects of the film is the score, the musical score of this. And there might be those who will recognize a certain, shall we say, maybe when one listens to the score, one might be reminded, shall we say, of the score to the film Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho, the Bernard Herrmann score. And so I think that has always been a source of peculiarity, shall we say. But I think however way we think of that, in any event, it could be said also to be a kind of homage to that tradition of horror that we found was so well established with Hitchcock's Psycho. I think another thing too is that we have a lot of links and linkages to the classic Hollywood horror tradition, say of Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein, and other similar types of horror films of that stature. And we get a lot of these homages as well. But throw into the mix here the aesthetic of 80s horror. And if we know the aesthetic of 80s horror, we can realize that there is a lot also of emphasis on the special effects, on the blood and guts, and on the showcasing of the effect itself. And I think that also becomes part of the reason one wants to watch this film, which is, how did they do that? Look at that. That is really interesting and neat. How did they pull that off? And it's all on screen, and some of the effects I think are really quite mind-blowing. And then there are other effects that I think are very clever, and then yet there are other effects that have a wonderful homemade quality to them. Very tactile, very pure, and I think very earnest. And so I think we're getting a really a totality, if you will, of a representation of the emphasis and importance that was placed during this time, the 80s, on the practical, tactile, physical special effect that is captured on screen. And we get it here in abundance in Re-Animator. And so I should say also that there are many different versions of this film. Sometimes I remember growing up and watching this on network TV in the United States, and as a result it was heavily edited down because it was shown on TV, and so a lot of the scenes were truncated. It was only a little bit later when I was able to watch this film in a fuller version, and I was marveling at how gross and disgusting it was, and also laughing so much along the way because I was really into it. And some of the scenes really escalate into the wild and absurd, and it builds and builds and builds and builds, and you think, how can it go any further than this? But it seems to do so, and it still manages to keep its balance, and it just barely it holds on, even as the splatter just goes all at it. And I love the film for that. I really do. So this is the wonderful film Re-Animator, and just has great performances. Jeffrey Combs, I think, is for many people That's one of the most iconic characters in horror cinema. So Herbert West, and so there's a lot here to grasp onto and to really enjoy and to be entertained by. But this is the film Re-Animator. Once again, it is certainly not for everyone, but if you are okay with this type of film, then I'm pretty sure that you are going to have a really fun time with this. And as I say, there are a lot of laughs and there are a lot of thrills along the way. And what more can one ask for when it comes to a wonderful example of 80s horror cinema? This is Re-Animator. Okay, my friends, so that's it for now. And so until we meet again, please be happy and healthy and well, and please keep on watching a lot of great, great movies. Thank you so much, as always, for your time, my dear, dear friends, and cheers. This has so many great quotes, but here's one of my favorites. Ah, Mr. West!